right now, I got a question on the board, right? There's a QR code. What does it mean to be a good coach? If you want to join that QR code, I already had someone put in an answer, but I'll give you guys a few seconds to come up with some answers of what it means to be a good coach. Develops athletes. A few people have talked about being a good leader, being supportive, patient, good communication, respectful, caring, being trusted, good listener, really good ideas of what it means to be a good coach and how you can embody that. And we're going to come back to that for today's lecture as a whole. But there we go. Before we get started, right, before we really answer that question of what it means to be a good coach, I want to introduce myself. Right? So if you didn't already know, my name's Jkelly. Talking about where I got to, how I became a coach, it's important you understand where I came from as an athlete. Because I'm sure for a lot of you guys, you might have been athletes before you became coaches. So here's me. I've been playing basketball from since the age of 6 years old. That's me right there holding that plaque. This is me on my high school team. We were actually able to win ROPSA. Another picture of me, I was actually able to play varsity basketball for the University of Waterloo men's basketball team, where I played for a few years. So you can see that I've been really entrenched in basketball as a whole. I've been playing competitively as I traversed this whole athlete coach pathway. And it led me to want to become a coach, right? I had some good coaches. I've gained a lot of basketball knowledge. So naturally that pathway, that step to become a coach was very natural for me, right? I've had the pleasure of coaching youth athletes in summer camps, recreation, drop-in, things like that. But a lot of my time today is spent working with the men's basketball team at Waterloo again as one of the assistant coaches. So you can see how some of my training, some of my work with the University of Waterloo has led me to this coaching position. But truly my passion for coaching, not so much of just following in someone else's footsteps, has been to educate coaches. And that's where I started my training platform, Jkelly Performance. This is my own personal business I started about 1.5 years ago, where the aim is to try to provide holistic basketball training using evidence-based ideas. So we try to touch on a variety of subjects, whether that's from sports psychology, motor learning, skill adaptation, business concepts. We try to apply it all using evidence-based ideas to help people reach their full potential, to get them good at something. That's truly my coaching philosophy, and that means a lot of different things, right? Full potential in terms of a human being, right? Getting good at being a good person, getting good at being an athlete. That encompasses a lot of different things, and that's what I strive to do as a coach. Before we get into the actual topic of today, I want to discuss the role of a coach. Why do we care so much about coaches, and why do we care so much about having a certain style of coaching? The first thing is positive youth development. For a lot of you guys, I'm sure, you're going to be coaching youth, right? And when I talk about youth, I'm talking about people who aren't really adults, right? You could say young adults, right? Maybe under the age of 16, 18, whatever have you, youth. That's where you're going to have your start in coaching. There's a lot more youth playing sports than there are adults. And positive youth development is just the idea that optimal development during the youth stages, when they're youth, is going to lead to healthy, satisfying, and productive lives as an adult. So essentially, what you do with people when they're younger is going to influence how they perform as an adult. And importantly, this is not just performance. This is not just them, their capabilities. This is beyond that. Being a good human being, being a good person, is concerned with more than just the particular athlete in that sport. Positive youth development is heavily influenced by the coach. The coach has a huge role in not just affecting the physical aspects, but the intellectual, the psychological, the emotional, and the social as well. And that's why it's so important to recognize your influence as a coach. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is a style of coaching that's going to help you be a better coach and help you positively influence youth and be an effective coach. This is the heart of today's discussion, transformational leadership. This is an idea that has been extended from business ideas, organizational psychology, but we're going to try to apply this to sports, right? Just a little bit of background. If you guys see the word TFL or anything of that nature, TFL or if you see transformational coaching, it's a shorthand for transformational leadership theory. And if you see coaching, it's trying to apply it in sports, right? Because at the end of the day, the coach is a leader. The coach is the leader of the team. So let's break it down. What is transformational leadership theory? Transformational leadership theory involves behaviors that are designed to inspire and challenge and enable followers to reach their full potential and become leaders themselves. So let's break that down, right? It's the idea that we want to inspire people to become a leader themselves and reach their full potential. That is the heart of transformational leadership theory. This goes beyond other styles of leadership where maybe you're concerned with being authentic or maybe athlete-centered. There's different styles of approaches there. This one is really concerned with transforming people, hence the name transformational leadership theory. And this is in stark contrast to what's known as transactional leadership, which involves behaviors where prestige or wages are received in exchange for following the leader's wishes. So it's that classic model of business where I work a certain amount of hours, I receive pay, I receive reward. I only follow the leader because I don't want to do wrong, or I'm going for some type of exchange with them, whether that's money, time, resources, whatever have you. How do we separate transformational leadership theory from transactional is the characteristics of what makes up a transformational leadership. And there are 4 main ones. The first one being idealized influence, which is earning the respect and trust by being a role model. Simply put, you want to model the behaviors you want your followers, and in our case, followers meaning athletes. You want to model the behaviors you want your followers to have. And that's being the ideal influence, being the role model. The next is inspirational motivation. And this is the idea that you want to inspire athletes and encourage them to do better and align with the goal that you have, the vision of the team. This is how you communicate with them, how you give feedback, how you help them. That's what inspirational motivation is, inspiring them to continue to work towards that shared vision. The next one being individual consideration. And this is the idea that we have to recognize and adapt to each follower's unique needs and abilities. Remember, a team in and of itself is a team of individuals. A team is made up of individuals, right? And recognizing each one's important and unique needs is how you be a transformational leader. The last one of those 4 I's I talked about is intellectual stimulation. And this is the idea that we want to challenge followers to think and problem solve in a variety of different ways, creatively, adaptively, to different problems that they face. Now, it's important to understand and note that in life, not everything is going to be transformational. There's a balance between transactional and transformational. If we have a pure transactional culture, a pure transactional type of leader, right, nothing really gets done except for their own interest, their own personal benefit. That's that exchange of wages. But if we think about pure transformational, while there is a sense of family, there is a sense of unity, nothing really gets done because all we talk about is ideals and goals, and no one actually works. And if you step into a new culture that's transformational, purely transformational, nobody really knows what to do because the roles are not specifically outlined. And that's why it's important to understand that successful organizations are going to have a mix of both transactional and transformational, with an emphasis being on the transformational. So still, there's that shared sense of unity and people working towards a common goal, trying to become leaders themselves. But there's a balance of everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing. There is some type of reward based on what your performance is. And that's what's important for a culture to be successful. Understanding this, there's been some additions to some of the 4 I's, right? To try to separate some of the factors in what has the most influence. The first one being having a shared and clear vision. Having that clear vision is important for people to actually work towards. If you don't have a shared and clear vision of those high performance level standards, nobody knows what to work for. The next one being contingent reward. Breaking down that word contingent, it just means that what you do, the success that you have, you will be rewarded appropriately for it. No one wants to work within a company or a situation or organization where you're never rewarded for your type of successes. That's why contingent reward was added as well. And the last one being fostering to and creating the group goals together. It's one thing to talk about this ideal, this shared vision of this beautiful land, but if you're not actually actively working towards getting there, nothing gets done. And those are some of the additions that are made to transformational leadership theory. Now, we've talked about mainly the 4 I's and some of those additions. Remember, idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. But let's talk about the effects it has on performance and why, if it even is effective in the first place. Transformational leadership theory and being a transformational leader is positively related to performance. Within the individual, we see improvements in task performance and their ability to go beyond the task, doing an extra role activity. So not just what I've asked them to do, but going above and beyond and doing more than what's asked. It also affects organizational performance, whereby the organization, the group as a whole, the team as a whole actually improves, not just the individual themselves. And finally, it's been shown through research that it actually does build on those transactional qualities. Remember, we talked about that balance. Having contingent reward, having those ideas of that exchange and transaction will only get you so far. It may motivate you to do the task individually, but going beyond that, you need transformational leadership. And that's important for us to understand that they build upon each other. Out of those factors, out of those 4 I's we talk about, are those things that we can separate the dimension of transformational leadership theory, the most important ones seem to be inspirational motivation and intellectual stimulation. They have the most positive influence on people and their ability to transform into leaders and reach their full potential. Now, truly, the heart of today's discussion, transformational coaching. We've seen how the 4 I's, those qualities of being a leader, and those additions as well, that's what separates a transformational leader from a transactional one. And we see that they can have a positive influence on their followers, right? But now we want to understand, how can we adapt this into the sports context? Because sports is a medium, a team, a setting for people to grow as leaders, right? We talked about positive youth development. Sports is truly the context, the situation where you can create situations to problem solve, to be adaptive. And that's why it's important to understand, as a coach, you want to have a theory of why you're coaching so you can better align with the evidence-based practices and actually help people the way you want them, the way you want to. So breaking this down, transformational leadership, like I talked about, aligns well with positive youth development. Remember, what you do as a youth is going to affect what you do as an adult. We're not only concerned with just the physical aspects, but the intellectual, the psychological, and the social as well. And helping people become leaders, transforming them into leaders, aligns very nicely with positive youth development. Not only is transformational leadership one of the leadership styles that has been proven over an extended period of time to be effective, it is also something that is trainable. There's research out there that shows that transformational leadership can be curated within individuals, and that's very important as well. How you can be a transformational leader within a sports setting, right? Breaking down some of these ideas we talked about. The coach is the one that creates the vision and models the appropriate behavior. Like we talked about, the coach is the leader. They're the one who sets the standard. What you do as a coach is going to affect how your athletes act as well. That's one way you can be a transformational leader as a coach. The next one is, the coach is the one who's going to stimulate enthusiasm and confidence. That is that inspirational motivation piece. The coach, again, is the one that's creating that environment where there is challenges, there is communication, there's feedback for people to grow. And that's how you do that as a coach. Following this, the coach is also the one who's able to individualize their attention for each athlete. Remember that team part. We talked about teams being formed of a bunch of individuals. The coach is the one who's able to curate what they're doing and carefully cultivate how they're shaping the environment for each athlete. What restrictions are you placing on each athlete? How are you communicating with each athlete? That is how you can be a transformational leader as a coach. The next one is, the coach can challenge the athlete's thinking and skills. We look at this drill here, right? We have a coach setting up a drill for the athlete. These drills are not only just for physical development, but they're also stimulating intellectually as well. Are you putting your athletes in certain situations where they have to be leaders? That is how you can intellectually stimulate people as the coach as well. And finally, at the end of the day, the coach is the one who recognizes and rewards achievements. They're the ones who are providing that contingent reward for the athlete. Sports, at the end of the day, is a transactional-based thing, right? There is winning, there is losing, there's playing time, these things. And the coach is the one who is going to control some of those aspects. Now, let's take a look at the effect of transformational leadership in sports and how it's been applied and how it has an effect on performance. Let's start first with at the interpersonal level, within the self, within the athlete themselves. First, we need to understand something called self-determination theory. Just a show of hands, have you guys ever heard of this before? Okay, perfect, great, cool. So this is a little review then. So self-determination theory is the idea that satisfaction of 3 psychological needs, that being autonomy, competence, and relatedness, leads to growth of the human psyche. And this is important because the coach is able to influence each of these dimensions separately, right? Autonomy is the perception of being in control of one's actions, right? And the coach is able to influence this by having that shared vision. If you have a shared vision, everyone can take ownership of the vision and work towards it themselves. That feeling of autonomy that my actions matter and I'm contributing to that shared goal. The next being individual consideration. When you're being recognized as your own person, as your own contributor to the goal, right? Again, ownership of that vision. The coach is talking to you individually. That helps you feel like what you're doing actually matters. You have that feeling of autonomy. And finally, we have intellectually stimulating people based on their own unique individual needs, finding that challenge and skills balance for each person so that they feel like they have ownership of what they're doing and what they're doing matters. The coach is also able to influence competence quite clearly, right? Which is the perception of mastery and effectiveness, right? Again, if we're considering each individual and challenging them intellectually based off of what they need in terms of their challenge and skills balance, you're going to have increases in competence. That is the most obvious one. The certain drills you set up, the way you coach the athlete, right? Also the way that you communicate with them is going to be important for creating that level of competence. Hey, good job, right? The way you set up your influence, how you become the role model also affects levels of competence, right? You are constantly showing the athletes what it looks like to be a professional in that aspect, right? The way you should conduct yourselves. That is a level of competence that the athletes are trying to raise themselves and grow and learn to be at. That's how you do that as a coach. And finally, as we can all understand, the coach, like we talked about, is the one who rewards athletes. When you achieve a certain level of competence, the coach is the one who's going to reward you for that. They're going to change the challenge. They might give you a little bit more freedom, more playing time. You're controlling that aspect of reward as you grow, as you get better, as you learn. And finally, relatedness, which is the perception of being respected and connected to others, is also influenced by the coach. Again, being the ideal influence, being the role model, and having that shared and clear vision helps unite all those individuals together, help them work together. And importantly, satisfaction of those three psychological needs is related to increases in well-being, that state of positive effect, right? Feeling like things are good, that subjective well-being. Satisfaction of those three needs from the coaching leads to well-being. And well-being has been shown as a mediator between the performance increases with transformational leadership. So I believe Dr. Ice came in and he talked a little bit about mediators and moderators with you guys, right? You see that pathway between well-being is going to affect the performance, right? Following this, intrinsic motivation is also a mediator for improvements in performance using transformational leadership theory, right? And that is just the idea of choosing to engage in the activities for the pleasure they bring and not the external reward. You cultivate that forcing comparison with others or comparison within yourself, right? How are you rewarding people? How are you balancing the transactional and the transformational aspects of coaching? That is how you can influence intrinsic motivation. Following this, self-efficacy, which is the belief of being able to execute the necessary behaviors to achieve success, is also something you influence as a coach, right? If you're constantly shaping the challenge and skills balance with an athlete, you're promoting feelings of, hey, I can do this. I can work towards this. I'm able to be effective in the situation. And that is something you shape as a coach. Moving on to the interpersonal aspect, so between people, right? How does transformational leadership affect that in a sports setting? Cohesion. Dr. Ice was here last week talking about cohesion with you guys. And just to recap, it's the tendency for a group to stick together, right? And these increases in cohesion, in that sense of we're all working together, is a mediator for increases in performance using transformational leadership in sports, right? The coach, importantly, what they found is the coach is the one who sets the high performance standards for people to work towards. And that helps motivate people to come together as a team and work together towards that shared goal. That's how you accomplish that as a coach. Next, we talked about the heart of transformational leadership theory, which is to create new leaders. And it's been shown to do that. Transformational leadership theory in sports has been shown to create peer leaders. And this is really important because within the team, you're going to have the coach as a leader for sure. But in between all the athletes, there are leaders, there are captains, pockets of people that step up and become leaders themselves, right? And you may look to those different leaders for different things. The coach, for example, has been noted to be the one who is there to create that vision, create that sense of unity, right? To reward people, to inspire them to want to play. But between the athletes, right, at that interpersonal level, they look to their peer leaders to help them for that sense of unity, for that sense of, hey guys, let's all work together to get to this goal. Not so much in the sense of creating that challenge. So there's differences in between the needs and the requirements and the ask of depending on the leader. And it's important that we've shown that you can create peer leaders using transformational leadership theory, which again is the heart of that theory. So we've seen the effect of transformational leadership in sports, right? It's going to affect well-being, intrinsic motivation, self-efficacy, cohesion, and it's also going to help create new leaders. Right, so we can see the theory is pretty robust, right? And it's pretty good for what it can do in sports. Now, I'd like to take a moment for you guys to take a second. I dropped, we put up a survey for you guys, survey or reflection piece, right? It's the differentiated transformational leadership inventory, right? So take a second, go on Learn, or you can just go on right here and use this. It's a Likert scale from 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being all the 5, and just kind of reflect on how transformational are you in relation to what's on the board here. We'll kind of bring it back in for a second. So, real quick, again, like this is not something that's been validated. There's other ones that are more validated in terms of like an organization perspective, like business and stuff like that. Did anything kind of jump out at you guys from this list? Anything jump out? Do I have any hands? Anything that you felt like, oh yeah, like I really embody that, or I'm surprised that that's on there. Anything we got? Any takers? No? I think for me, right, when I'm thinking about how I can be a transformational coach in terms of this scale, like I'm always thinking about this intellectual stimulation piece. Like how am I challenging my athletes to think about problems in new ways? I think too often I can kind of fall into the habitual practice of I'm creating the same drills, the same problems, the same situations for them, but how am I actually challenging them to work in a new way? Did anyone else have like a feeling, something that stood out to them like that? No? No takers? Oh, yes. Cool. So hopefully you guys can warm up a little bit more because we're going to talk, this is going to be more of a discussion for the rest of class, right? Discussion with a few practical takeaways, right? And I want to talk about finding the balance between transformational and transactional. Because like I mentioned before, sports is a transactional thing. It's a transactional context in nature, right? You have playing time, you have rewards, you have medals, achievements, wins, losses, all those things are rewards. They're all exchanges that you make, not necessarily with the coach, but with the actual aspect of the game, the environment itself. And so how do we find balance with being a transformational leader and not being too transactional as well? So I have this QR code. I don't think we're gonna do QR. We're gonna do hands up. I'd rather do hands up, right? And the question for all these situations is, how are these behaviors transformational or transactional, right? And I'd like you guys to participate, put up your hand, let me know your thoughts, and we'll break some of these ideas down together. The first one, transformational or transactional, doing some sort of exercise as punishment. So for example, 10 push-ups. Is that something that is transformational or something that's more transactional? So talk about why it is or how you feel about that. Any idea? Like just put out there. There is no right or wrong answer here. There's no right or wrong. I just want to know your thoughts. Yeah.
I think it could be both.
Depending on the agreement that you have with your athlete, it could change what the context of that is.
Yeah.
Right, that's a great point, right? Depending on your relationship with the athlete, right? Individually considering them, it could be transformational. It could help them. It could motivate them, right? Anyone else agree or want to build on? Yes. Exactly. There's like that. Like she was talking about, there's that exchange, right? If I have to do this because the coach said to do that, right? You have that negative connection with exercise stemming from that. Does anyone want to agree, build, or challenge that notion? Anyone else have anything to say about that? Transformational or transactional? Playing time. Yes. So you're talking more of using playing time as like a motivational piece.
Yes.
Okay, like agreed upon with the athlete, you use it to motivate them.
But it could be viewed
Absolutely.
as
There's only so many people that can play on the field or the court, right? Basketball's 5. The other teams is like 12, 11, right? So absolutely, right? That's going back to the idea of contingent reward, right? Playing time is essentially the reward in a lot of sports. Playing time is the reward for doing well, for having the success, right? And I kind of want to build on what's been said and maybe go a little bit deeper as well. Playing time, while it is the reward, depending on how you use it, how the motivational piece behind it, it could be transformational or it could be transactional, depending on how you use it. Yelling at players or other aggressive, fear-based coaching. Maybe someone makes a mistake and you yell at them, you snap, right? Or maybe you're using certain styles of things to motivate people with fear, maybe with exercise, things like that. Is that transformational or is that transactional in nature? And I want to challenge you and everyone else here. Maybe let's go a bit deeper there. It can definitely motivate the athlete, but remember, transformational leadership in the essence is about creating a leader, helping them reach their full potential. How could you argue that yelling at someone or using fear-based coaching is transforming them to leaders? Is there anything you guys can think about of why that could be transformational? Because remember, it's all about creating yes, absolutely, right? I mean, even personally, like a personal anecdote, like I don't like I can be yelled at. That happens when you play high level of sports. You can get yelled at, but do I like being yelled at? Or have I gotten used to it? Is it something that's been a habitual process for me, right? And, I would argue that maybe yelling at people isn't necessarily so transformational as we might think. But let's move on to the last one, right? Specified roles. And when I say specified roles, I'm talking about, hey, you can only do this. You can only do that. We need you for this, that. Is this transformational or transactional? The reason I bring up these examples and I brought up these situations because these are kind of common things that happen in sports. I think, we can all probably agree that you've seen a coach yell at a player. You've seen people do punishments with exercise, running laps, right? Suicides, push-ups, things like that. You've seen people be specified into certain roles, right? And of course, sports has that idea of playing time, who's gonna play, who's gonna start. But I really want us to think deeply about whether those behaviors as a coach are necessary or something that's become habitual, and then whether they're actually transactional or transformational in nature, right? And a takeaway from this discussion I want you guys to have is, how do you balance these two aspects? It's going to be context. Context matters. This is a figure adapted from Kite et al., but really it's a model from Cote and some of his colleagues. Maybe you guys have read a little bit about Jean Cote from Queens, right? I'm sure you've heard of him. It's the developmental model of sports participation, right? How athletes get into sports and how they traverse, right? It starts from entry into sports. You move up to the sampling years, 6 to 12, going to specializing years, investment, 16 plus, and eventually becoming an elite athlete. And those sampling years, those 6 to 12 years, are characterized by doing a lot of different activities, different sports, right? And slowly that dwindles into the specific sport. And I want us to take away that these behaviors, these things that we're doing, are going to change in nature depending on where an athlete is in this continuum, right? For people who are younger, for children who are younger, 6 to 12, perhaps it's not necessarily about winning for them, competition for them, right? We've seen through research, they're more concerned with having fun, learning new skills, connecting with their friends, right? So depending on how much balance you put into transactional or transformational is going to change depending on the age. Whereas you might have an elite performance athlete, perhaps at the varsity level, and you might need to be a little bit more transactional in nature. You might need to have some of those contingent rewards in place for success. You might need to have those high performance standards that are not necessarily standards, but more of a rule. You have to achieve this, right? And finding that balance is going to be important based on the athlete, the context. Because like I said, sports is still a transactional thing in nature. Now I want to take a step back and just go over some practical takeaways from our discussion. Like, what can we actually take away? What are some maxims we can use? These are some of my favorite maxims I've generated from my coaching experience, from other coaches around me, and hopefully you guys can find some value in them. The first one being, sweep the shed and smell like a shepherd. Right, this is kind of a funny one. I like this one a lot, right? So sweep the shed. When we're talking about sweeping the shed, right? The shed, right? The dirty place, right? It's not clean, blah, 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 right? All the tools are there. To be a good leader, to be an influence on your players, you have to sweep the shed. You have to be willing to grab the hose and do the dirty work. Everyone sweeps the shed. What you ask of your players, you should be asking of yourself. That's how you become the idealized influence for them, right? When I mentioned the shepherd, right? The shepherd of sheep, right? His followers per se, right? A good shepherd smells like his sheep, right? Like I said, they're sweeping the shed with them. They're in with the sheep. Everyone is in there, right? So to be that idealized influence, you have to sweep the shed and be a shepherd. The next one, catch people doing the right things and be an elevator. I really like this one, catch people doing the right things. I think in coaching, we often critique negative aspects of behavior. We always catch people when they're doing something wrong, when they make a mistake. But I want you guys to kind of flip your thinking and try to think about how you can catch people doing the right things when they're actually working towards the goal, when they're actually following what you define as success, and be an elevator, elevate them. Bring them up, talk to them, inspire them, motivate them. This is related to that inspirational motivation, right? Bring them up. And that's just the element of being the elevator. Right? But first, you got to catch them doing the right things. The next one, this is really important, right? We coach people who play sports. We coach people who play sports, right? At the end of the day, although you want success, you want winning, you want all these different things. Like we talked about positive youth development, right? All those aspects of TFL. Everyone who plays sports is a person. They have a life outside of sports, right? And that's why it's so important to know your player. Know what motivates them. Know what they need. Know what challenge they need. Know what skill set they have right now, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just coaching a person. You're not coaching an athlete, just another name on the line, right? That's why it's so important to know your player and understand that you coach people who play sports. The next one, how do you actually stimulate someone intellectually? How do you actually create that challenge for them? Well, first, you have to create a culture that accepts failure. And that's that fail first. Fail first. You want to create a culture where failure is appropriate, creating that sense of psychological safety. And if you don't know what psychological safety is, just that it's that feeling that taking those risks within the group are going to be accepted. You're not afraid to ask for help. You're not afraid to try new things. And in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable as a leader, kind of tying back into that idealized influence. You have to be vulnerable yourself. You have to be the one willing to take risks, to willing to challenge yourself, to problem solve, think in creative ways. And if you do that, you've created that sense of culture within the team that allows for failure to be appropriate and to be accepted and to be something you guys are working forward towards. Because that's how you're going to actually create new leaders. The last one, and this is kind of relating all that stuff about reward. Right? Give everyone a role, create together, and win the day. When we talk about sports, obviously there are aspects of winning and losing, right? But there are different ways to win and lose. It's not necessarily so much about, scoring or winning the game. Perhaps you're winning the day. You're winning what your role was, right? Hey, I need you to be an elevator on this team, right? And when they are doing that, they've won the day. They've won what their actual job was. And that role is something you should be creating together with the players, kind of tying back to what we talked about before, right? Different things mean different things for different people. So creating that role together, ensuring that everyone has a way to win the day is a way that you can instill confidence, right? Motivation into people and still have that element of reward, of being rewarded for your success. Now, I wanted to take a moment and pause and open up the floor for anyone who wanted to share a time where you had a transformational coach, or share a time, or maybe just tell us about what behavior you're going to try and embody. I can say personally for myself, reflecting on transformational leadership, I really had to reflect on if I'm actually trying to create leaders, right? I can do so much in my practice so I can make different problems for them, but how am I actually setting up a situation where they can become a leader? Am I giving them time to coordinate amongst themselves? Am I giving them time to be a leader within their peer group? That's something I have to work on as a coach myself. Absolutely, right? KYP, I love that expression, KYP, know your player, right? How you do that? Maybe a survey, maybe a group discussion, right? Maybe some type of team bonding exercise, right? Individually considering them again. No other takers for, the only reason I'm spending so much time on this and talking to you guys about what you can take away from this is because I find that, you might spend all this time learning about maybe how to make the right decisions or different styles of coaching, how to communicate, all these different things. Like, that's all great, right? But are you actually taking those things away from the course and applying them? That's why I'm asking this. So no, we have no others who want to talk about how they're going to be a transformational coach or something they can try to apply, something they can turn the dial up, the volume up? Nobody? No? Yes. So I want to go back to our original question today. I asked you guys, how can you be a good coach? And I want to change the wording a little bit. How you can be an effective coach, right? Because there's many ways to be a good coach, and good is kind of, fluffy. It's not very concrete, right? We want a better definition of how we can define effectiveness. And this is really going to be important. I think some of you guys have mentioned this, we talked about this in class as well. So it's going to be important to kind of wrap this all up and bring it all together. And we're going to be using a lot of work from Jkelly and his colleagues. Okay. To start off, to be an effective coach, you need to have good coaching knowledge, right? You need to have professional knowledge of the game that you're playing, the business side, the tactical side, the skill side, the physical development side. You need that knowledge, right? I picked basketball because obviously I'm a hooper, right? But depending on your sport, you're going to have different professional knowledge. You need to have interpersonal knowledge as well. How do you communicate with people, right? How do you be an effective communicator? We talked about that in one of the classes as well. Intrapersonal knowledge, you need knowledge of yourself, the ability to self-reflect, to perform metacognition, think about the way you're thinking, adapt as a coach, evolve. That's important to being a good coach, an effective coach. You got to think about the athlete's outcomes, right? We talked about those 4 C's based off of Jkelly, right? Competence, right? Obviously the abilities to do things. Confidence, right? Relating to self-efficacy, that feeling I can do this, right? Being motivated, connection with others, relatedness, things of that nature, cohesion, and character, right? Just being good, a functioning member of society, being caring, being respectful, being a good individual. That's important as well. And a formal definition of coaching effectiveness, right, is going to be the consistent application of knowledge to improve an athlete's outcomes in specific coaching contexts, right? Going back to what we talked about, depending on where you are in that athlete continuum, right? You guys might have learned of like train to compete, learn to compete, all those different pathways, right? You could be using the DSMP, like the Jkelly sampling years, things like that. Where the athlete is, where the person you're coaching, where the team is going to change how you apply your knowledge to influence the athlete's outcomes. I wanted to kind of bring us home with that in mind because although there are many styles of coaching, there are many styles, there's many ways to coach. There's many different things you can do as a coach. I truly believe transformational leadership is going to be one that aligns very well with what we talked about being an effective coach. At the end of the day, using those 4 I's as your ways to exhibit these behaviors, at the end of the day, everyone you coach has an opportunity to be a leader in life, right? Whether that's they choose to become a parent, maybe they're already a sibling, right? Maybe they have siblings, they can be an auntie or uncle, right? You can be an employee, right? You might become a teacher, right? It depends on what your job is. You all have an opportunity to be a leader, no matter what athlete you're coaching. And that's why I truly believe transformational leadership is so important, because it's the essence of trying to help people reach their full potential and become leaders themselves, right? There's many different ways to do it, but how many of them are focusing on making new leaders? How many of them are focusing on how you stimulate people intellectually? How many are focusing on the individual needs and considerations? How many are trying to be the ideal role model, right? And how many of them are trying to continually motivate people and inspire them to do better, right? So hopefully you guys left today with some better understanding of transformational leadership theory, understanding what it might mean to be an effective coach in a way you can do that through transformational leadership. Thank you guys for all your time today. Appreciate it.